I am Michael, the Archangel of the Lord Most High. You know the story. A man named Lazarus, dead 4 days, brought back to life by the voice of Jesus. But you do not know what we saw, nor what happened in the realm unseen by mortal eyes. What you call death, we see as a gate, guarded, contested, and often chained by forces that seek to keep souls away from the promise of God. When Lazarus died, the gates were not silent. Darkness moved quickly. There was a battle over his soul, a battle most humans never see nor imagine. Today, I will tell you what truly happened. I will reveal the clash between heaven's light and the shadows of the pit. I will show you why Jesus delayed coming to Bethany, why his tears were deeper than sorrow, and what it cost in the unseen war to bring Lazarus back. John 11 verses 1 to 44. I am Michael, servant of the Most High, commander in the armies of heaven. You have read the story of Lazarus in your scriptures, but there is more, far more than human eyes could see. When the message first came to the Master about Lazarus, I was not far from Bethany. I had been watching over the small household of Mary, Martha, and their brother. They were a house of light, a place where heaven's presence was welcomed. But it is always those who carry the light that the shadows seek to dim. I knew Lazarus was sick before the messenger even began his journey. For days, I had seen a strange heaviness gather over him. It was not just illness of the body. It was a spiritual weight, like a cold mist curling through the unseen air. When the first fever struck him, I knew this was no random sickness. I could hear the whispers, faint but venomous, the murmurs of spirits who delight in despair. They circled his bed like vultures over a battlefield. These were not low spirits, not mere tempters. No, these were keepers of the grave, spirits that taste the end of breath and hunger for the soul. They had marked Lazarus because of who he loved and because of who loved him. I still remember when Martha's hands shook as she wrote the words to be carried to the Master. Lord, the one you love is sick. Her voice trembled when she told the messenger to hurry. Mary clung to the doorway, her eyes already swollen from crying. They believed if Jesus came quickly, Lazarus would not die. What they could not see, what I could see, was that the sickness was more than flesh failing. Death itself was watching, and its servants were already moving. I followed the messenger unseen as he made his way to where Jesus was. When the words were spoken, I expected my Lord to rise immediately, but he did not. Instead, he said something that made the unseen tremble. This sickness will not end in death. It is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. John 11 verse 4. The spirits around Lazarus did not understand. They heard the words, but thought them foolish. They believed death was certain and final. They had no idea that their own greed for this soul was going to be their trap. You must understand, in the unseen war, time is a weapon. To you, delay feels like absence. To the enemy, delay feels like opportunity. And to the Lord, delay can be the stage upon which a greater victory is revealed. Jesus waited. One day, then another. The spirits in Bethany grew bolder. I could hear their confidence building as Lazarus's body weakened. They whispered into the hearts of those in the house, fanning fear. He will not come. He does not care. This is the end. Mary and Martha prayed, but their hope began to strain under the weight of silence. The messenger returned without Jesus beside him. In that moment, I saw the shadow around Lazarus's bed darken like a storm cloud before lightning. On the day Lazarus took his final breath, I was there. His eyes fluttered, his breathing grew shallow, and in the unseen, the veil between worlds began to thin. I tightened my grip on my sword, for I knew what was coming. The moment his breath ceased, the air in the room grew colder. The mourners wailed, but I heard another sound, the hiss of triumph from the spirits of death. They began to move in, their forms stretching like black smoke. One, a spirit older than most, leaned over him and whispered in a voice like breaking stone, "He is ours now." But I stood between them and his departing spirit. "Not yet," I said, my voice like a clash of iron. "His fate is not in your hands." They sneered. "Your Lord is far away. The body will rot. Even you cannot hold him from us forever." Then I saw it, Lazarus' spirit, lifting like a dim light from his body. He looked confused at first, as most do when they leave the world. His eyes widened as he realized he was no longer breathing, no longer feeling the weight of sickness. He turned toward me, and I saw the question in his eyes. I spoke gently, "Do not be afraid. The Lord has not forgotten you." But the gates were opening, not the gates of the city, but the gates of Sheol. They loomed in the distance, ancient and unyielding, guarded by beings who have kept watch since the fall of man. The spirits around us began to push him toward those gates. Lazarus looked back toward his body. He could hear his sisters crying, even from the other side. I could see his longing to return, but without the command from heaven, I could not yet bring him back. And so, I followed, my blade ready, as they led him toward the place where no man can return without the voice of the King. In heaven, the scroll of his life was still open. This was not the end of his chapter, but the timing of his return was not for me to decide. The Lord had set his plan, and his delay would become the undoing of the enemy's confidence. Even as I walked with Lazarus toward the gates, I could feel the eyes of heaven upon us. And though the shadows thought they were winning, I knew this was only the beginning of something far greater. The stage was being set. The watchers in the unseen were gathering. And death itself did not yet realize it was about to face the one who would tear its keys from its grasp. I am Michael, the commander of heaven's armies, the one who stands in the presence of the Most High. What I am about to tell you is not written in your scriptures, yet it is bound to the truth you know. This is what happened to Lazarus after his last breath, while his body lay still in Bethany, and his sisters wept on the earth. When a soul leaves the body, there is a moment of silence, the kind of silence that feels like the air itself is holding its breath. That silence is the veil between your world and the unseen one. In that moment, both heaven and hell watch closely. For every departing soul is a battle to be claimed or defended. I walked beside Lazarus as his spirit lifted away from the broken shell of his body. He looked bewildered, as most do in those first moments. He could still hear Mary's cries and Martha's prayers from the other side. His heart, if I can call it that, was torn between the peace of leaving pain behind and the ache of leaving love unfinished. We began to move through the shadowed realm, the place between the living and the dead. The path was not like any road on earth. It seemed to stretch in all directions at once, shifting as if it was alive. And ahead, far in the distance, was the glow, not a warm, golden glow, but a pale, cold light. That was the light of the gates of Sheol, the dwelling of the dead. The guardians of that realm were already aware of us. They are not like men or angels. They are ancient, older than the nations, shaped in forms too strange for human minds to fully understand. Half like stone, half like shadow. Their eyes burn like embers in the dark. They are not kings, for Sheol has no king, but they are its watchers, and their loyalty is only to the law of death. We walked, and with each step, I could feel the pull. It is not the pull of gravity as you know it. It is the pull of finality. It whispers to the soul, "You belong here now. Do not resist." Lazarus kept glancing at me, as though to make sure I was still there. I spoke to him softly, "Do not fear. The Lord has not abandoned you. This journey is not what it seems." But the enemy's spirits were circling. They took the shapes of cloaked figures, moving like smoke, whispering into Lazarus's ears, "Your sisters will forget you. Your master did not come. You are nothing now." He clenched his jaw and looked forward, but I could see the doubt growing inside him. And doubt is dangerous in the realm of the dead, for it weighs down the soul, making it easier for the pull to drag them to the gates. We drew closer to Sheol's entrance. It was not a gate of iron or wood. It was an arch of jagged stone, black as night, with no hinges or bars. Yet nothing can pass without permission. A cold wind poured from within, carrying the voices of thousands who had gone before. Some called out in despair, others in anger, and some in a strange longing, as if they had accepted their place but never their fate. The watchers of the gate stepped forward. They towered over us, their forms shifting in the gloom. One spoke, his voice like the grinding of mountains. "This soul is claimed by death. Stand aside, Michael." I lifted my head and met their gaze. My voice was calm, but it carried the authority of the one who sent me. "The scroll of his life is not yet closed. You will not take him." A ripple moved through the shadows around us. The spirits that had followed us hissed and retreated slightly, for they knew my name, and they feared the one I serve. But the watchers did not move. They are bound to their duty. "He has drawn his last breath in the land of the living," the second watcher said. "His time has come. The grave calls him." I tightened my grip on my sword, though I had not yet drawn it. "You speak as if you know the end," I answered. "But the end is written only in the hand of my Lord." They did not like this. Their forms grew darker, their shapes more twisted. Around us, the wind from the gates became a howl, and from within, I sensed others coming. Not watchers, something worse. They were the spirits who keep the lower places, the ones who delight in torment. They swarmed at the edges of the path, their eyes gleaming with hunger. They had tasted the death of kings and the despair of prophets. They wanted this one too, not because Lazarus was a great ruler or a warrior, but because of the one who loved him. To them, wounding a friend of Jesus was like striking at Jesus himself. I stepped in front of Lazarus, spreading my wings wide. My light cut through the darkness, pushing the lesser spirits back. But I knew this was only holding them for a time. The watchers were still unmoved. And then it happened. From far away, so far that it seemed like it was coming from another world, I heard a voice. It was not yet calling Lazarus. It was speaking to the disciples, miles away from Bethany. It was the voice of my Lord, and it carried a certainty that made the entire realm of death shiver. "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him." John 11 verse 11. The watchers froze. The howling wind stilled for a breath. The spirits that had gathered backed away as if struck. That one sentence, spoken in the realm of men, had rolled like thunder into the realm of the dead. I smiled. I leaned toward the watchers and said, "You hear him. The king is coming." The watchers looked at one another. They could not deny the command that was already forming in heaven. They knew their claim on this soul was slipping away. The path behind us began to brighten, faint at first, like dawn breaking in the distance. And I knew what it meant. The armies of heaven were already stirring. The Lord's delay was over. But the enemy was not going to give up without a fight. And as the gates loomed over us, I felt the first tremor of the battle that was about to begin. The light behind us grew stronger, but with it came a surge of resistance from the enemy. Darkness does not yield quietly when light draws near. It writhes, it fights, it clings to whatever it can still hold. The watchers at Sheol's gate stepped aside just enough to let the lesser spirits flood toward us. They came not in neat ranks, but in a chaotic storm. Black shapes with claws like hooks, faces shifting between human and beast, eyes burning with malice. Their voices were like 1,000 whispers all at once, each trying to slip past my guard and into the ears of Lazarus. "Stay, rest here. Your pain is over. Your master delayed. He could have saved you, but he didn't. Your sisters will find another to love them." Each word was aimed to break his spirit, for in the realm between life and death, despair is a chain stronger than iron. I stepped forward, placing myself between Lazarus and the approaching swarm. My sword ignited with heaven's fire, not the fire of destruction, but the fire of purity, the same flame that burns in the presence of God's throne. Its light seared through the nearest spirits, scattering them back with shrieks. "Stay close to me," I told Lazarus. "Do not answer them. Do not even look at them. Fix your eyes forward." He obeyed, but I could feel his soul trembling. This was not like any trial he had faced in the land of the living. Here, the enemy could twist memories, sharpen regrets, and weigh down the will with every mistake a man had ever made. And they tried. Oh, how they tried. In the darkness around us, images began to form, memories from his life, altered and poisoned. He saw himself arguing with his sisters, moments of selfishness magnified until they seemed monstrous. He saw imagined futures without him, where his family forgot his name. All of it was a lie, yet in this realm, lies can feel as heavy as truth. I struck down the nearest shadow and spoke with the voice that carries the authority of my Lord. Enough. The images shattered like glass, and the wind from the gates roared in anger. That was when I felt it, a deeper presence moving beneath the surface of this battle. Not one of the smaller spirits, but a prince of the realm below. I will not speak his name here, for it is not fitting for the lips of the servants of God to give honor to darkness. But I knew him. I had faced him before. His dominion was over despair and finality, and many souls had been dragged into Sheol by his hand. He emerged from the shadows like a mountain rising from the sea, vast, imposing, and crowned with a mockery of authority. His voice rolled through the realm like distant thunder. "This soul is mine," he declared. "He has tasted death. That is enough. You speak as though your word is final." I answered, my wings spreading wide. "But there is one whose voice is greater than yours, and he has already spoken." He smiled, if you can call that twisted expression a smile. "He has not yet come," the prince said. "You think you can hold me here until he does? You cannot fight us all." And then he lifted his hand. From the depths of Sheol, more rose, creatures without form, rolling like smoke, reaching with hands of shadow. They poured toward us, surrounding us on every side. I could feel the pressure mounting. If they could not overpower me by force, they would try to overwhelm Lazarus with numbers, drowning his will to hold on. The prince knew the rules of this realm well. A soul that stops resisting is a soul already lost. I moved quickly. In one motion, I swept Lazarus behind me and drew a circle of fire on the ground with my sword. The fire rose like a wall around him, burning with light that no spirit of darkness could cross. The swarm crashed against it, hissing, their shapes twisting in the glow. Some tried to leap over it, but the fire rose higher, and they fell back, writhing. The prince watched, his expression unreadable. "You cannot keep him forever," he said. "Your fire will fade." "Perhaps," I replied, "but not before the one who calls him arrives." At that, his eyes narrowed. He could feel it too, the approaching presence. The words my Lord had spoken earlier were still echoing through the realm, growing stronger with each passing moment. It was not yet the final command, but it was enough to shake the foundations of Sheol. The prince moved closer, the ground trembling beneath his steps. "I will not surrender him without a contest," he said. "Then you will have one," I answered. What followed was not like the battles of men. There were no swords clashing in the way you imagine, no lines of soldiers meeting. This was a war of wills, of authority, of light against shadow. When I struck, my blows carried the decree of heaven. When he countered, his strikes carried the weight of death itself. The realm around us rippled with each exchange, as if the fabric of the place was straining under the force. The lesser spirits circled like vultures, waiting for an opening. The watchers stood still, bound by their role, observing but not interfering. They are not free to join such a battle unless the law of the realm is broken, and neither of us had broken it yet. Then, through the clash, I heard it again, this time not as a distant echo, but closer, stronger, like a trumpet cutting through the fog. Lazarus, come out. John 11 verse 43. The prince staggered. The swarm froze mid-charge. Even the wind from the gate stopped, as if the entire realm was holding its breath. That single command, spoken by the Son of God in the world of the living, had crossed the chasm between life and death like a bolt of lightning. The fire around Lazarus blazed brighter, and the pull of Sheol on his soul snapped like a rope cut clean through. The prince roared, not in pain, but in rage. His claim was broken, and he knew it. I stepped between him and Lazarus, my sword raised high. "It is finished," I said. "You have no hold on him." The prince drew back, his form already dissolving into the shadows. The swarm scattered, melting into the dark. The watchers turned away, for their law had been overruled by a higher command. I turned to Lazarus. He looked lighter, as if the weight on his spirit had been lifted. "It is time," I told him. "You will return." He nodded, though I could see the shock in his eyes. Few who come this far toward Sheol ever return, and none without the hand of the Lord to bring them back. The path behind us was now blazing with light, a bridge between realms. And at its far end, the presence of my Lord was waiting. I took Lazarus by the arm and began to lead him back. The gates of Sheol faded behind us, the whispers and winds dying away. The darkness could not follow us now. The voice that had called him was too strong, and its authority was absolute. And as we began the ascent toward the world of the living, I knew that what had just happened would not only change Lazarus's life, it would shake the powers of darkness themselves. The bridge of light stretched out before us, cutting a path through the deep shadow between realms. It was not a bridge of stone or wood, but a living current of the Lord's command, every pulse of it carrying the authority that holds the universe together. I kept Lazarus close to me as we began our ascent. The realm of death is like an ocean, and this bridge was the only solid ground in that endless black water. Around us, the shadows lingered at a distance, watching but unable to cross. They hissed and muttered, their voices fading the further we went, as though the light itself burned away their power. Lazarus's steps were unsteady. Though his spirit had been freed from the grip of Sheol, the journey back to the land of the living was no simple matter. His soul had already begun to settle into the stillness of death, and now it was being pulled upward against the natural flow of this realm. "Do not look back," I told him, my voice firm but calm. "Everything behind you has no claim on you now. Fix your eyes ahead. The one who calls you waits there." He nodded slowly, but I could feel his struggle. Memories of the world above began to surface, his home in Bethany, the laughter of his sisters, the warmth of sunlight on his face. These memories pulled at him, drawing him forward, yet there was also a strange weight trying to hold him down. Not the chains of the enemy anymore, but the heaviness of having been dead. The body is not made to be left and returned to. The soul feels the strangeness of it. As we moved higher, I became aware of other presences joining us. Not the hostile spirits of Sheol, but messengers of light, my fellow servants of the Most High. They appeared along the edges of the bridge, walking in silence, their faces bright with the reflection of the Lord's glory. Some you would call guardian angels, though their duties in moments like these go far beyond guarding. They were here to stabilize the path, to make sure no stray current from the dark could strike Lazarus on his ascent. One of them, a warrior I have known since the days before man walked the earth, spoke without words, his voice carried in the spirit. The enemy is stirred. They will attempt to strike again before the gate. I already knew this. It is rare that a soul is called back from death, and rarer still for it to be done so publicly. The adversary would not let such a sign pass without a final attempt to mar it. Sure enough, as we neared the midpoint of the bridge, the light around us flickered, not from weakness, but from the shadows pressing in. They could not set foot on the bridge, but they could reach toward it. Tendrils of black smoke coiled up from the sides, twisting and snapping like the arms of some great creature. Lazarus flinched when one of them lashed toward him. I stepped in front of it, swinging my sword in a wide arc. The blade cut through the smoke, and the tendril dissolved with a sound like tearing cloth. "They will not touch you," I said to him. "Even in this moment, you are in his hand." But the assaults grew more desperate. The shadows began to form faces, each one speaking in voices Lazarus knew. Friends, neighbors, even family members who had passed away long before. The enemy has no shame in its tricks. It will use the likeness of the dead to make the living turn back. One face, an older man, called out, "Lazarus, you've been with us here. Why go back? There's nothing waiting for you but pain. Stay with me." I could feel the pull those words had on him. The human heart longs for reunion, and the enemy twists that longing into a chain. I stepped between them, raising my voice so that it rang across the bridge. "He is not yours. He is not staying. The Lord calls, and the Lord's will is final." The light surged at my words, and the false faces melted into the dark once more. We pressed on. The air grew lighter, the pull of the earth above stronger. Lazarus's steps quickened, though he still leaned on my arm. It was then that we began to hear something faint, the sound of voices from the world above. At first it was like hearing through water, but as we rose, the words became clearer. "Take away the stone." John 11 verse 39. It was my Lord's voice that cut through first, strong, commanding, yet filled with compassion. Even here, in the space between death and life, his words carried power that no force could resist. Lazarus's head lifted, his eyes widening. He recognized that voice. In the days before his death, he had heard it often, teaching, calling, laughing at the table with his family. Now it reached into the depths to find him. But along with the voice of my Lord, we heard others, the murmuring of the crowd gathered at his tomb. Some were weeping, some were whispering doubts. The sound of human disbelief has a weight in the spirit realm, and the enemy will try to use it. But faith, even the size of a mustard seed, is stronger still. We reached the final stretch of the bridge, and the light became almost blinding. Here, the realm of the living and the realm of the dead touched, like two shores nearly meeting. I could see the veil that separated them, thin, shimmering, and alive with the breath of God. The shadows made one last attempt. They rose like a wave, crashing toward us from both sides, their voices screaming in unison. I planted my feet, spread my wings wide, and brought my sword down into the bridge itself. The light erupted outward in a shockwave, throwing the darkness back so far they could not return in time. The veil began to part. Through it, I saw the inside of the tomb, the stone just being rolled away, sunlight piercing the darkness of that place. I could see my Lord standing outside, his eyes fixed on the place where Lazarus's body lay. Around him were Mary and Martha, their faces wet with tears, not knowing what was about to happen. Then the command came, not as an echo this time, but as a living force. "Lazarus, come out." The sound of it filled the bridge, the air, the very core of my being. It was not just sound, it was the power that called creation into being, now focused on one man's name. I turned to Lazarus. His face was lit with awe and something more. The realization that the one who loved him had never abandoned him, even in death. "It's time," I said softly. He stepped forward, passing through the veil. For a moment, I walked beside him, until my feet no longer touched the bridge but hovered above the place between worlds. My work in this part was nearly done. I watched as his soul entered his body once more. It was not like slipping into a garment. It was like fire returning to a lamp, light filling a place that had been empty. His chest rose, his fingers twitched, and then, for the first time in 4 days, he drew breath. From the crowd came a gasp, then cries of astonishment. My Lord smiled, a quiet joy in his eyes, as Lazarus stood, still wrapped in burial cloths. "Unbind him and let him go," my Lord said, John 11 verse 44. And though they could not see me, I stood still for a moment longer, watching the life return fully to him. The battle was over. The enemy had failed, and the glory of God had just been displayed in a way that would echo for generations. But even as I turned to depart, I knew this miracle would set in motion events that would lead my Lord to his own tomb, and to a greater victory still. When the breath of life returned to Lazarus and his eyes opened in that dim tomb, the earthly crowd thought the moment was over. They thought the miracle was complete. But I tell you, children of dust and light, that the raising itself was only the visible crest of a much greater wave that had been set in motion. The true weight of what had happened rippled outward, into the spiritual realm, into the hearts of men, into the councils of both heaven and the enemy's court. I stood just beyond the veil after Lazarus stepped back into the world of the living. My sword, still glowing faintly with the residue of the bridge's light, was at my side. My wings were half folded. I watched in silence as his sisters rushed to him, their hands trembling as they unwound the burial cloths from his body. Mary's sobs broke into laughter. Martha kept touching his face as if to assure herself he was real. The onlookers murmured in shock, some falling to their knees, others stepping back in fear. The air around them still vibrated with the residue of my Lord's command, "Lazarus, come out." That command had not only penetrated the grave, it had carved a scar into the enemy's stronghold, a reminder that even in this fallen world, death answers to the voice of its creator. Yet I could sense the shift in the spiritual currents above and below. This miracle was not done echoing. From the shadows beyond sight, I felt the stirrings of the adversary's fury. He had lost the soul he thought securely bound. The blow to his pride was deep, for it was not only defeat, it was defeat in the face of witnesses. He despises public loss, for it undermines the fear he rules by. Already his messengers were rushing to whisper into the ears of the temple leaders, twisting their thoughts. If he can call the dead to life, imagine what will happen to your power. Better to silence him now. I knew this raising of Lazarus would become one of the final stones in the path toward the cross. It would seal my Lord's fate in the councils of men. And though my warrior's heart longed to sweep away the schemes forming in the darkness, I also knew that my Lord had come for this very road, the road that would lead to his own grave, and beyond it, to the crushing of death forever. Still, there was work to be done here before I returned to the higher courts. For though Lazarus now stood breathing, the enemy had not abandoned his attempts to mar the miracle. Invisible to human eyes, lingering threads of shadow still clung to him. not enough to pull him back, but enough to trouble his dreams, to try to fill him with fear in the nights ahead. That is the nature of the adversary. If he cannot stop the light, he will try to dim its witness. I moved close to Lazarus. My hand passed through the space between us, severing those threads with a single sweep. They hissed as they dissolved into the air, and Lazarus's shoulders eased, though he did not know why. He would sleep peacefully that night. Around the crowd, angels moved quietly among the people. Some stood beside those whose faith had been stirred to life, guarding the spark so it would grow. Others walked with those who were retreating in doubt, planting seeds that might take root later. You must understand, in every great work of God on earth, there is a hidden labor in the spiritual realm to protect its fruit. Without it, the enemy's birds of prey would snatch away the seeds before they had a chance to grow. I turned my gaze to my Lord. He was speaking softly to Mary and Martha, his eyes warm with compassion, yet I could also see the weight he carried. He knew what this sign would cost him. He had pulled his friend from death, but in doing so, he had drawn the eyes of his enemies fully upon himself. Above him, I saw what the humans could not, the Spirit resting like a mantle on his shoulders, bright and steady, unmoved by the storm already gathering. Around him stood the invisible host, the ones assigned to guard his earthly steps until the appointed hour. Some of them were restless, their hands on the hilts of their swords, eager to intervene against the plotting of men. But they, like I, knew the greater plan. The Lamb had to walk willingly to the altar. No sword from our ranks would turn that path aside. Beyond the hills of Bethany, the message was already spreading. I watched as unseen couriers, not of our kind, but the messengers of the enemy, darted toward Jerusalem. Their task was to fan the flames of fear in the Sanhedrin, to frame this act of love as a threat to the nation's stability. I could almost hear the murmurs that would soon rise in the council chamber. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation. John 11, verse 48. But for now, in this moment, Bethany was filled with joy. Neighbors poured into the street. Children ran ahead to spread the news, and the scent of freshly broken bread drifted from the house where a meal was being prepared. Lazarus walked beside his sisters, his steps growing surer with every moment. His voice was hoarse, but he laughed as he spoke, as though life itself were a song on his lips. I followed at a distance, not to be seen, but to keep watch. You see, when someone is given back their life in such a way, they are marked in the Spirit. Both heaven and hell take notice. Heaven assigns greater guardianship, for their testimony will be a light to many. Hell assigns greater opposition, for their very existence is a threat. That night, as the household of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus gathered to eat, I stood watch outside. The stars above were bright, yet I could see, beyond them, the movement in the higher realms, the gathering of the enemy's council, their frustration boiling. Some of them argued for an immediate strike, but they were bound by the same truth that binds all creation. Nothing happens without the Lord's allowance. And he, in his wisdom, had set this miracle as a marker on the road to Golgotha. In the quiet of that night, I allowed myself a moment to remember the sound of my Lord's voice calling Lazarus. That command will echo in my memory for all the ages, for it was a preview of what is to come. One day, at the appointed time, that same voice will call not just one man, but all who have fallen asleep in him. The dead in Christ will rise, the graves will empty, and death will be no more. This day in Bethany was but a shadow of that greater morning. I knew that Lazarus, too, would die again one day, as all mortals do before the final resurrection. But I also knew that he would never again fear death in the same way. He had walked its cold corridors and had been called back by the voice of the one who holds the keys. That kind of knowing changes a man. When dawn came, I left Bethany for a time. There were other assignments, other battles, but my gaze never left the unfolding path of my Lord. I watched as the news of Lazarus's raising brought crowds to him in Jerusalem. I watched as the chief priests and Pharisees began to plot in earnest, not only against him, but against Lazarus as well. John 12 verses 10 to 11. Yes, they sought to kill him too, thinking that if they silenced the evidence, they could silence the truth. Such is the blindness of those who fight against the light. They forget that truth is not a man's life, but the life of God himself. In the courts of heaven, the record of that day was sealed, not just the record of the miracle, but of the war that raged unseen to make it possible. Every sword raised, every shadow banished, every whisper of faith strengthened, all of it written in the eternal account. And I tell you now, mortal listener, the same battle rages still around the works of God in your own life. You may not see the bridge of light. You may not hear the clash of steel or the hiss of shadows retreating. But if your eyes could be opened for even a moment, you would know you are never left alone in the fight. That is why I warn you, treasure the moments when the Lord moves in your life. Guard them. Speak of them often. The enemy will try to cloud them with doubt, to make you forget. Do not let him. Your testimony is a weapon forged in the fire of his power. As for Lazarus, his life after that day was not without trials, but it was marked by an unshakable certainty. And whenever he looked into the eyes of my Lord, he remembered the sound of that command, the voice that broke the gates of death to call him home. One day, you too will hear that voice. And when you do, no shadow, no chain, no darkness will be able to hold you. I know. I was there in Bethany, and I will be there on that last great morning. You know the story as a moment of glory, but remember this. Every resurrection, every act of life in the face of death is a battle in the unseen. When you see delay in your prayers, do not think heaven has forgotten. Sometimes the delay is the setup for a greater victory. Sometimes the silence hides the marching of angel armies. I am Michael, servant of the Most High. I watched the dead walk again at the word of my King. And I tell you this, the same voice that called Lazarus from the grave can call you from any darkness.